My Lords, I rise to move Amendment 237 and speak to Amendment 238 and 239 in my name. That predatory and rent-seeking financial practices by investment firms, hedge funds, often based in tax havens with extremely complex ownership structures, have placed unmanageable financial and human costs on the UK care sector is an issue that I first learned about in 2016 from the brilliant Centre for Research into Economic and Socio-Cultural Change, then based in Manchester, sadly no longer extant. Since then, the issue has become an absolute staple on the pages of the Financial Times. And any noble lord who doesn't know about this issue, I'd urge them to look up Financial Times #UK social care, because you'll see then a long string of stories from what's certainly not a publication representing generally my side of politics, saying how much of a problem this is. And I note also that last week the noble Lord Seeker, not currently in his place, initiated an oral question that highlighted some of the worst abuses in financialised care homes, from HC1 siphoning off 20% of its revenues to offshore affiliates through intragroup transactions, to, as the noble lady Baroness Brinton, who may well raise this again later, highlighting that the industry average is 16% of the money not going to care, but going to the financial sector. The crisis is here and was only further highlighted by the recent Panorama report. What's been lacking, however, and I've been looking for them since 2016, is solutions. How do we actually get to the point of changing this situation? And it is worth pointing out that this is not how things have always been. If you go back to the 1980s, the NHS was known genuinely as a world leader for geriatric care, as it was then known, picking up the half of the care sector that's for older people. And in 1982, there were only 44,000 private care home beds. By 1994, there were 164,000 private care home beds. The number of charity, non-profit, local authority beds plummeted, and the private sector came in, or indeed displaced the public. Now, the amendments to the Health and Care Bill I'm presenting today rely on the work of the all-party parliamentary group Limits to Growth, and they have an excellent report covering these issues in much more detail than I've got time today that I'd urge people to look at. And they indeed have worked on these amendments and produced these amendments. Now, I start with Amendment 237, which takes what I think could be a deeply dangerous element of the government's bill, and one that's got very little attention thus far, a provision allowing for government support for private care facilities. This is something that is not possible now. And what this Amendment 237 does is adds a provision that these funds cannot be used for making payments on debt obligations for for-profit bodies or for distributions to shareholders, huge payouts that were highlighted in last week's debate. That takes us further, however, and I think it's interesting that the government amendment, I suspect unintentionally, does actually give us a way forward to start to unwind the privatisation, the potential problem that I won't say if, I will say when, more private care homes crash, as we've already seen two major crashes, Southern Cross in 2011 and Four Seasons Healthcare in 2019, how do we actually start to move towards worker cooperatives, social enterprises, local authority homes, charity-run homes? How do we ensure people can stay in those homes safely and be cared for, and not see the money siphoned off into offshore tax havens? So we can use Clause 141 with this amendment for actually potentially really positively, even revolutionary purposes. Now, Amendment 238 picks up a point that I often make, that a foundation to tackling our out-of-control financial sector and ensuring fair taxes are paid by companies is country-by-country reporting. This amendment requires that any related companies within the same corporate group that are registered offshore would be under the same financial and reporting financial reporting and publication requirements as those bodies registered in the UK. That means expenditure on dividends, directors' fees, interest payments and similar would have to be fully and transparently declared. And, my Lords, I'd have to ask the Labour Lord the Minister, what does he have against transparency in the financial sector? Surely money that's either the money of older, vulnerable people in our society or the state money that's supporting them, what could the government possibly have against seeing exactly where that money goes? Because that's all that this amendment does, demand that transparency. Now, I would say that these two amendments are not a total solution. I don't have a panacea for the situation, but they're a start, and that's why they're combined with the third amendment, 239, calling for a review, a very simple, obvious amendment of a type you often see in your Lordship's House. And I will note that I'm actually joining the former Conservative Health Secretary, Jeremy Hunt, who also recently called for a review of the funding. So, we do see some unusual alliances in this House. This is an unusual alliance between the two houses. So, in conclusion, my Lords, the care sector, we all know this debate, the many hours, as has just been highlighted, has focused on what a mess the care sector is. And this is the most vulnerable members in our society, and a significant part of that mess is because money is being siphoned away from their care. We can use this bill with these three modest amendments to start to turn around that situation. I beg to move.